Hiba Elias.
And I'm Chevon Drew.
And welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, where we explore how racial justice work
is showing up everywhere around us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. I am your co-host Chevon, and my co-host Hiba will not be on this episode. She is attending to some very important things right now, and I'm going to hold it down for her. I do have an announcement that comes from her body of work. As you know, she works really hard on Facing Race. We have the Facing Race conference every 2 years, so I'm really happy to deliver this news on her behalf. Facing Race is the largest multiracial, intergenerational gathering for organizers and educators and creatives and all leaders in the movement for racial justice. And the big news that Hiba would want all of you to know is that registration is now open, y'all. Facing Race will take place this November 17th through the 19th, 2022, in Phoenix, Arizona, in person and online. So if you want early bird or group tickets, those are available. Learn more and register by visiting facingrace.raceforward.org. That's facingrace.raceforward.org. And shouts to Hiba, shouts to the whole conferences and convenings team. We are so excited about this year's Facing Race. We're going to get into an interview with our guest, Nancy Wang Yuen, and I will be flying solo for this one, so give me all your positive energy. And once again, shout out to my co-host Hiba. We'll see you when you're back. Nancy Wang Yuen is a sociologist and expert on race and racism in Hollywood, as well as the host of the Disruptors podcast. In 2008, she became a professor in the Department of Sociology at Biola University. And in 2016, she began a term as the chair of that department. Nancy is the author of Real Inequality: Hollywood Actors and Racism. She's co-editor of Power Women: Stories of Motherhood, Faith, and the Academy. Her work has been featured in CNN, Elle, Gizmodo, the Los Angeles Times, NBC, and many more. Nancy gives talks on representations of Asians in Hollywood, anti-Asian racism, and how to thrive on Twitter as an academic. Nancy is also a speaker and cultural consultant for top companies including Amazon Studios and the Academy of Motion Pictures. In addition to her academic research, Nancy was also interviewed in the PBS documentary Asian Americans, and she is currently writing a book about her life through the film and television shows that she grew up watching. So Nancy, first of all, I'm glad that you're down with talking about things and then also having a little bit of a kiki, because clearly I like a good joke. I guess I would start off by asking you, though, about something more serious, which is, how did the anti-Asian attacks, how has that had an impact on your work?
Okay, I think it was in the very, very beginning of the pandemic when there were reports of anti-Asian attacks, right? And this was way before I think the country kind of recognized it. But those of us, in the community were very aware that, and also I think once we heard that there was possible tracing of the original virus to China, most of us were like, oh, Asian Americans. It doesn't even matter if you're Chinese American or not, because, how in this country, we kind of think that all Asians look alike and reduce everyone to a single stereotype. And so I was very scared, especially with, the unknown, especially in the beginning. We didn't know much about COVID. And so there was, I think I wrote a piece really early on about how there were two things that Asian Americans were afraid of: getting COVID and being attacked, and how it was emotionally just kind of a double whammy. And it was really hard, I think, to go out, not just because we're worried about catching the virus, but also that we could be attacked both verbally and physically. And I think that once the videos were coming out, and then I think it was Atlanta shootings in March of this past, of 2021, that's when I think the country started to recognize, okay, this is not just, a one-off thing, but that we have serious racism problems that we need to acknowledge. And I think that there was confusion. I think as, someone who has studied race for a long time, written about it and lived it in terms of being an Asian American immigrant myself as a young child and growing up here, I knew about racism, and I didn't really, it was, I think, the first time that I recognized that my own country never, or a majority of folks did not know that Asians experience racism at a high volume. So I think that that was kind of a moment where and also that other Asian Americans, who maybe didn't recognize things that were happening to them in their lives and maybe never took an ethnic studies and just wasn't aware because they were assimilating into majority, culture here. They didn't know either. Right. And so just recognizing that there was a lot of reckoning that this country needed to do with anti-Asian racism. And so it was really hard, but it was also a moment of, I think, mobilization for a lot of Asian American studies scholars, where we were, I think, post Atlanta shootings, we were like on the news all the time, just talking about this. But that took a toll on me personally, like just naming all the racism and also naming the intersectionality of race and racism and sexism for Asian women specifically, because the Atlanta shootings, if you'll remember, the murderer actually said that, Asian women were temptations, and he was trying to excise his temptations, and he targeted Asian spas specifically, right? And murdered, I believe it was 8 women, Asian women, or was this maybe 8 people and 6 of them were Asian women. And so I think that I had to also explain that racism and sexism intersect for women of color and Asian women in this instance when it comes to stereotypes of sexualization, exoticization, fetishization, that all that is actually a hate crime because they were not going to, prosecute it as a hate crime because he just talked about temptations. And that just astounded me. I just couldn't believe that that was happening. And so it felt very urgent, but also very taxing emotionally to have to, live through this pandemic, live with the fear, and then have to, advocate for my people at the same time. And I know that, this is stuff that the Black community has gone through forever. And I think that for Asian Americans, a lot of Asian Americans, this was somewhat new, just because I think they weren't necessarily facing it on such a mass scale and in popular kind of culture, right? That there was so much news coverage, there were videos going viral. And so, yeah, so sorry, this is a long answer to what's going on with anti-Asian racism. And wow, there's, it's just been a long 2 years with the pandemic. But also I think, what was really cool was being able to talk about historical context, right, of the Page Act and the Chinese Exclusion Act, and how I think disease and kind of stereotypes of Asians as, going to kind of infect the whole community, those kind of stereotypes, are long standing in this country. It didn't just come out during COVID. They've been around, and they've been intersecting with the way we think about immigration, the way we think about racism. So it isn't just Asians, but just the kind of fear of the other, the xenophobia that this country, even though this country is totally made up of, immigrants, whether they were, forced or, voluntary. And so I think that, we need to, I think, again, have this reckoning and greater understanding, I think, of what is going on in this country in terms of variety of racism, and how anti-Asian racism is also tied in, with kind of general racism and fear of the other.
Yes. You said so much that people in the audience, I think, will value. I hope that folks will also go look up some of the acts that you mentioned, some of those laws against Asian people, like that stuff is what we need to all learn about. You also were a guest on the PBS series Americans. And I believe, I want to say Jeff Chang was also interviewed for that series. Would you weave any of that experience into this kind of elongated answer? Because I feel like you dropped a ton of jewels, but that is kind of related, that series.
Yeah, so that series, I filmed that series before the pandemic, and then it came out during the pandemic. So the timing was actually just right in terms of what we needed to know and understand more. Because if you have not taken an Asian American studies class, even if you have, this PBS documentary, it doesn't cover everything, but I think it covers a lot of what the general public does not know about how Asian Americans are so vital and so central to American history. And so I cover, because my research and interests are in Hollywood. I talked about kind of early Hollywood breakthrough artists like Sesue Hayakawa and Anna May Wong. But the series goes through, I think, immigration history, the Japanese internment, but also like I think lesser known, like how Filipinos were here, in this country prior to the founding of this country. And so and then, and also South Asians, and there's great kind of segments on post 9/11. And so it really covers, and also political history, the political figures, like, the first woman of color, I think, to Congress was Patsy Mink. And so like, that was an Asian American. And so lots of, I think, history that is not known, but so central to understanding, this country. We are part of this country. And I think that was kind of the message, that Asian Americans have been part of this country, even prior to the founding of the country. So this whole idea that we're like recent or all recent immigrants, or go back to your country. Some people have been here, generations longer than a lot of the, European immigrants, right? That think that we like to stereotype as quote unquote Americans, but in fact, there have been Asians here since before the founding of the country. So the documentary is just also entertaining. It's got actors and comedians, and I think that, it is also like, I cried. I remember watching it actually, and also writing the piece about, surviving the pandemic as an Asian. Actually, that was the piece. Actually, it was about how to kind of deal with the rising anti-Asian hate and the pandemic. And I was talking about that. It was even like, it was sometimes emotionally hard to see the fact that we've been here so long, we've worked so hard to build this country, and now, you're blaming the entire pandemic on us. It felt so, I felt betrayed, like watching the documentary and recognizing our belonging, and then knowing that there are so many people that are telling us to, get out because somehow we've brought the disease. I mean, we are here under the same, circumstance, and actually we're doing our part to mask up and get vaccinated. We have some of the highest, percentages in that, because I think in Asia, they are very aware of kind of public health and our commitment and duty to one another as a very kind of communal society. And so people, I've traveled to Taiwan, I've traveled to Japan, and in those countries, people mask up when they're sick. So they are sick and they're masking up in order to protect other people from getting colds. Like, that is the culture. And so it's so funny that, blaming Asians. In fact, Asian Americans are working very hard to, eradicate this by doing their duty in public health. So there's so many contradictions and ironies and misunderstandings, and it feels so hard to kind of be living as an Asian in this country. I'll just say that right now.
I want to thank you for that honesty and just the personal feelings that you shared. I know that's a lot. I think that folks need to go and watch that PBS documentary ASAP. And if we are to lighten it up slightly, I want to pause just to give the audience a sense of where you are and what your background is right now. Can I do that? Because I'm kind of loving the look. Okay, Nancy is coming to you live from what looks like a very elegant, soft closet. That's my guess. I don't know if I'm wrong. I see garments hanging, I see a lot of neutrals, some soft blues. So I just wanted to give the audience a sense of how I'm seeing you. You look like you're kind of calm today, and I know we went deep first. I want to thank you for going there with me. And I want to take it light again and ask you about what we're seeing in pop culture. You mentioned actors and things like that. So I'm thinking of things like Squid Games, Parasite, the popularity of K-pop. Can you talk about what shift we might be seeing currently with Asian representations in media, and where you think the shift might be coming from?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I think Asians are trendy right now, and hopefully it isn't just a trend, but that it's the beginnings of, I think, recognizing that there has been Asian talent in Asian cinema in South Korea, in Hong Kong, in Bollywood, in the Southeast countries as well. I mean, there has just been Japan. I mean, I think just to kind of give some idea, like the last 3 years, the Oscars have nominated an East Asian director, and the last 2 years they've won, which is phenomenal. Like Bong Joon-ho won for Parasite, Chloe Zhao last year won for Nomadland, and this year we have the director for Drive My Car, and that's a Japanese director. And so we have the Academy actually has opened up. There was during the Oscar So White controversy, it was also revealed that the Academy is extremely homogenous. So it's not just in terms of gender and race, but in the kind of like 90%, like in terms of whiteness and male, but also over the age of 60, and also predominantly US based, right? So the Academy actually made an effort to open up not just to, people of color and women, but also international, right? And I think that international sensibility is now starting to recognize that, oh my goodness, like South Korea has had a dominance, yeah, and like you mentioned, in K-pop, in pop music, in cinema, in television. They've dominated this actually in Asia already for a long time. Like I was a little girl, I was a teenager when I went to Taiwan, and my grandmother, who loves her dramas, we were hiking, and she basically told me the entire story of a K-drama on our hike, because she would say it was so good. The production value was so much better than anything that she had seen. And so, South Korea stuff has been awesome for a really long time. And finally, I think in the United States, we're seeing with the popularity of BTS, with the popularity of cinema, like Parasite and now Squid Game, even though, these are all kind of like, it's like, they're just indications of patterns of excellence that's been around for a very, very long time. And it's funny because I've started tweeting out like, this isn't the first. And it's like the recognizing of the West doesn't mean that, all of a sudden it's real. But there is that kind of like, oh my gosh, I've just discovered, Korean blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's exciting. And I definitely don't want to like, poo poo like enthusiasm, but it is this kind of like a Columbus kind of thing. Like we discovered America when America has already been populated by all sorts of wonderful people that, maybe didn't want you there. And so I think this importing of Asian culture, pop culture is interesting, right? Because they're not new. Like whenever I would go to Taiwan every summer as a kid, and I would just fall in love with, whatever pop music and drama was going on there. And so anyway, but yes, I think what I'm interested in as a kind of US based researcher also is that post Crazy Rich Asians, Asian American talent is also being recognized, right? And I think that we, for forever, I think it's like every 25 years, maybe we'll have a movie. It was like, I think, if we think about the 60s, it was like Flower Drum Song was the first kind of studio production, and then it was Joy Luck Club in the 90s, and then it was Crazy Rich Asians in the 2018 time. I mean, this is a huge swath of time between these big, I mean, there are lots of indie movies, lots of talent, lots of creative works that were happening, but Hollywood did not fund, did not greenlight, did not market until I think Crazy Rich Asians now I think kind of broke expectations. And because I think Ghost in the Shell, right, that was a big kind of controversy with Scarlett Johansson playing a beloved Japanese manga character. The excuse of casting her was that there were no A-list actors that were good enough, right? But then you have Crazy Rich Asians coming out, and I think Henry Golding, he was even an actor before that movie. He was maybe I think a travel show host in Malaysia. And so this is brand new talent, right? And now he's like everywhere, right? He's gorgeous, right? So that helps. And I think that, that it's really show that something, if there's talent and there's a good story, it's also based on, a New York Times bestseller with Kevin Kwan. And there's 3 books, so there's 3 movies potential, and we've only seen the first. And it did so well at the box office. It was, I think, the top box office rom-com in a decade, right? So not just like Asian rom-coms, even though there's not even that many because we really had no movies, but all rom-coms, right? It kind of, I think, showed that this mid-level, because now we're in a point, especially during the pandemic, where everything is like tentpole, huge budget comic book movies, right? That's like all Hollywood is investing in. And then there's the streaming stuff, right? And rom-coms, are this kind of mid-level, not too expensive, but, has an audience that hasn't been satisfied. I think, we've been missing those, right? And so I think Crazy Rich Asians really filled that niche. And also it's a story that hasn't been told. I think that, there's so many Asian American stories that have not been told, like the murder of Vincent Chen, which is like a huge hate crime that happened in the 80s. We don't know that story. I mean, within the community, we know that story, but not even everyone. And, the documentary Asian Americans covers it, but I think that we don't know that story yet in terms of narrative. Not even, I mean, there's a documentary by Renee Tajima Pena, who also was the executive producer of the Asian Americans documentary. And that is like the documentary to see if you want to see. Like, I think every Asian American studies course shows who killed Vincent Chen, right? Because it's kind of like, the story of Vincent Chen is that, he was murdered in cold blood, but the murderers, and it was a hate crime because it was during the Detroit auto workers, recession, and they blamed Japan, but Vincent Chen was actually Chinese, and they killed him with a baseball bat. And then they got off. They didn't even serve one day of jail, right? So it was, I think they were fined like maybe $5,000 or something. And so the story is a narrative story that's set in America, set in the United States. And I think that we need stories like that to be told, right? So there's so many stories that are Asian American that haven't been told that Hollywood can tell. And I think that there's an audience for. And so I think that, so with the kind of beauty of Asian culture coming in finally, or in like a mass appeal way, especially because of streaming, right? So now streaming, something like Netflix, they have so much international content. Actually, a lot of their international content, not just from Asia, but also from Europe and Latin America. I think also, it's exposing people to, and also subtitles. People are actually reading subtitles, and also they're doing, Netflix also does a great job with dubbing, or, well, I don't know, great job. There's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of controversy about Squid Game, whether they got the dubbing and the translation correct. But anyhow, all this to say is that, yes, Asian and Asian American pop culture and talent is, I think, finally being recognized in Hollywood. And it's definitely an exciting moment to be experiencing. And then, this and the anti-Asian racism and, Asian Olympic power, Asian American Olympics, right? We have 2 golds with Chloe Kim and Nathan Chen. It's definitely, I think, Asian Americans and Asian talent is, it's golden right now, really golden.
Let's talk about academia. As an Asian American woman in academia, can you talk about some of the challenges you faced or are still facing in the academic sphere? I'm watching people opining that, hey, this country would rather bring in the National Guard rather than raise the standard of pay for teachers. Like, I'm seeing a lot of debate, and I just want to hear from you since you spend so much time in that space.
Oh, goodness. I'm like, I think one of only in a lot of spaces that I'm in. And I think that this is the experience of a lot of women of color in academia. And Asian American women, I think, in the humanities and social sciences are not necessarily like, having a presence. I think there's maybe more Asians in the sciences, international scholars and, Asian American. But I think that's certainly my experience as a sociology professor. It's been both like challenging and also I think like you can really make a difference, right? I think a lot of us feel very responsible for, speaking out and, challenging systems and advocating for students of color. Like I talked about in terms of the advocacy work, I think all of us are exhausted, right? If you're the one of only, you're experiencing a lot of microaggressions, you are probably one of the only ones in the room that's ever like bringing up issues of race and gender and, advocating for marginalized groups. And then, and yet you are, kind of, you have the same expectations of productivity, right? In terms of being a good teacher, in terms of publishing and committee work. A lot of times I think Asian American women, along with other women of color, are put on diversity committees and, we're expected to kind of do that work. And at the same time, we are experiencing the kind of everyday microaggressions and sometimes, overt racism and sexism. And so I think all that makes it really hard, I think, for as an Asian American woman. And also, and this kind of questioning of belonging, right? I mean, I know a lot of Asian Americans who are told on their evaluations that they can't understand them or something, even if they do or do not have an accent. I have a friend who actually she's mixed white and Asian, and she teaches Latin America. That's her research. And she has been told that she had an accent and also that she uses too much Spanish in her class because she's trying to explain concepts. So just this, even as she's just, it's kind of like this, again, like kind of a general xenophobia, right? So anything that's not English and squarely white American is suspect, right? And I think that Asian women, because of that perpetual foreigner stereotype, and also this kind of, I think there's a stereotype that we need to be passive and demure. And so as academics, as, powerful, intelligent, knowledgeable women, I've definitely had, I think people feel like cognitive dissonance when they hear me talk and see that my personality is, I'm not like super like aggressive, but it's okay if I were, right? If I were, but because of the stereotype that Asian women have to be a certain way, any other kind of personalities I think can be off-putting to students, right? But I have to say that overall, I mean, when I first started teaching race, there was definitely a lot of pushback because I think in my department there weren't like the students were not actually exposed at my university to a lot of instruction about race and inequality. So when I first started talking about it, it was very uncomfortable for them, and they took it out on me because I think the cognitive dissonance that I shouldn't be talking about this stuff, I shouldn't be making them uncomfortable. And so, but ever since then, ever since our student population became more majority BIPOC, I think that it's gotten so much better. And I feel a lot of kinship with my students, and even the white students, I think, are coming in now with a lot of knowledge about inequality. And so I have to say that recently, in the last 5 years, my teaching has been just splendid. And it's great to be able to talk to and help. And that's my passion, to be able to embolden, empower students of color to be able to understand, inequality, to understand their own identities, and to be able to make a difference in the world.
That is awesome. Are there any folks you follow on social media or any groups you're a part of where you get support as an academic of color, especially as a woman, that you would want to throw out there for folks?
Yeah, University of Michigan has scholars of color. There's also, gosh, I have to like look it up in terms of actual, but I'll give you the links. But it's like a support group for scholars of color, and I am also part of I think it's like social scientists mostly that are actually trying to make a difference in the public sphere. And so that's another group. And then there's the National Faculty Diversity Group that is, it's an independent group, but it provides a lot of resources for faculty of color, actually all faculty, but it's, the purpose is to empower faculty of color. It has a lot of, I think, how to get tenure, how to write, have a good writing routine. I gave a talk to them about how to do Twitter as an academic. A lot of actually universities have memberships because it is a little pricey, but some scholars that I know, colleagues, actually put it in grants, that this is, or actually negotiate it as part of their package when they're hired, because it gives kind of professional training that, and Carrie Ann Rockamore is the leader of this. And she was a tenured sociology professor who then quit and started this amazing, organization that provides so many resources that I think it's like the mentorship that we should have in academia, that especially as scholars of color, that you may not be part of the old boys network, right? So then this provides those kind of tips and helpful guides, and also community where she has like writing sprints and stuff that like, or like they're kind of like writing groups, and you can join like periodically, and these are free. And then it's like, I think you write together for like 4 or 5 weeks, and you have accountability every day. Just like tips, like, once you finish your writing goal in the day, you give yourself a treat. It's like so Pavlovian, but it's like we need those, because I think academics, we're so good about delayed gratification. Everything is delayed gratification, but that makes for burnout, right? So much burnout, especially everything that I shared with the microaggressions and having to talk about race and advocate all the time. We are the first to burn out. And so having that kind of mentoring essentially and coaching that this program builds in is just wonderful. So I highly recommend that. A lot of my friends actually were able to get tenure through just the boot camps that they were finally able to finish that book and get tenure. So it's excellent.
Okay. Academics out there, don't say the podcast never gave you anything. Those were jewels, 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 and resources, and we will follow up for the links. Thank you for that. Amazing. Now let's talk about something that we're always told we shouldn't talk about. Faith, religion. You are a host of the Disruptors podcast, which is a faith-based podcast. So I'm wondering if you find it challenging to showcase Christianity like in a different light in these times where religion and specifically Christianity is oftentimes associated with more conservative groups and more right-wing ideology in the public sphere. So let's just light everything on fire with a religion and faith question.
I think being a sociologist, that actually came out of my faith as well. Like I feel like at its root, it is a faith for the marginal. It is a faith for the underrepresented, the vulnerable populations, because that was, if you read the Bible, that is who Jesus reached out to, the kind of people that were, that the society forgot about or even persecutes, right? And so that was what kind of drew me to sociology, and also being a person of color, you experience those things and you want to see justice, right? And I think Martin Luther King was actually a sociology undergrad, and, he was a minister. And of course, obviously, the whole civil rights leader and amazing kind of inspiration for us today, but just did so much to change this country. And I think that when people ask me, what's this Christian stuff about? And I say like, well, I am like an MLK Christian. I follow in that. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm doing anything of that level, but I aspire to work as much as I can based on my training and my giftings. And whether it's through my research, whether through my writing, whether through speaking, in public, or just in the classroom, or just with my family, right? I want to be able to make a difference, and it is rooted in my faith. But it's really hard right now because I think, like you said, it's not just the public kind of Christianity is rooted in an actual movement, right? There is this movement where there's this idea that somehow justice work is anti-Christian or anti-gospel, which is so strange to me. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense to me in that I think there's Christian nationalism, right? There's kind of a convolution or reduction of Christianity to this kind of nationalist, often, racist and, movement that actually, I think, makes it that people can say things like you're doing woke stuff, so you're not Christian, right? I've actually been personally attacked even recently over this, right? And having to defend my faith and defend why I even identify as Asian American and not Christian first, as if like we can just easily tease out these things. And I think there's a misunderstanding of what normative identities are, that everything kind of in this country is normative white. So when you say that I'm Christian, but I don't say I'm white, Christianity has become white, right? In their minds. And I identify as an Asian American Christian. And those are things that like, I think are very confusing in this time where actually the church growth is in these immigrant communities, is in the Asian American church, is in the Latinx church, right? In the Latina Latinx church, and the kind of stability and the long-standing Black church, right, in this country, and all the work that I think the Black church has always gotten, that, that justice work and religion is intertwined. But then we have, this kind of this movement of kind of xenophobia and fear of the other that has infiltrated certain Christian churches, and now the Christian kind of political movement that we know that Trump kind of tapped into. And it's very polarized right now, Chevon, and it's actually deeply disturbing for me. And it's probably one of the biggest kind of crises of what do I do as a Christian of color in this moment? How do I continue on? And I think that those are the things I explore in the podcast, The Disruptors. Before me, the host for 2 seasons was Esau McCauley, who is a Black theologian from Wheaton College. And he started this, kind of asking the question of how do we disrupt society in both justice ways and faith ways? And I think that, being a progressive justice-minded Christian is disruptive because it disrupts the idea or the stereotype of what a Christian looks like, because I think we if we, and yet it's like those people do exist and they are the loudest, right? And so I think that here I am, trying to also bring in people like Jean Luen Yang and Minjin Lee, who are huge culture makers that I think I've talked to some people, they're like, oh, they're Christian. I think there's a lot of surprise. But then when you talk to them, you realize all of their kind of work and their culture making and the artistry that they do is all infused with faith, right? Even if it's not overt, although Jean Luen Yang actually does put little Easter eggs and Bible verses in his, in his graphic novels. But we talked about, like, Min and I talked about how it's about love, right? It's about emphasizing the love portion, the acceptance portion of Christianity, which is why I became one, as a young person. I did not come because someday someone was going to, judge me or be racist towards me. That would have been, I would not have signed up for that Christianity. So, and actually I also came to faith through Asian American churches. So it was like Korean Christians are some of the most passionate people you ever meet. I went to a Filipino Catholic church. I prayed the sinner's prayer with my Japanese friend who's a pastor's daughter in my front yard. So it's like all of my exposures to the faith have all been rooted in Asian America. So I really am so thankful for that. So I think my identity is, it's all kind of, talk about, intersecting. It's all one, for me. And so I think that, but to have to explain it to or justify myself to actually conservative Christians, because I do run in those circles as well, it's another layer of exhaustion, Chevon. It's another layer of kind of discrimination that I experience.
I hear you. I loved hearing about your younger experiences with your faith. I love that. And I like that you're talking about love and kindness and all of those things that we all could probably practice more of in this moment as well, no matter your faith. So I'm going to just honor that. I want to come with more love in the way that I reach out to people in this time as well. We don't know what folks are going through. So thank you for sharing how, your faith has informed your journey. I think we've come to that time where we have talked about some of your works, Real Inequality, Power Women, the Disruptors podcast. And now I want you to tell the audience where they can find you on social. Do you want them to follow you on Twitter, Facebook? Where are you active?
Yeah, I pretty much live on Twitter. I think during the pandemic, it's like physical space is, I don't know what that is. That's in a different dimension, We live on the virtual world. So I am on Twitter at Nancy Wyen. I actually, I used to have a love-hate with Twitter, but I have had just so many positive experiences and connections. Right now, this morning, I was talking about how Asians have curly hair, like awesome gold medalist Nathan Chen and Queen Sandra Oh, like just celebrating curly hair, and I've had so many people actually say, like, gosh, I hated my curly hair as an Asian because the stereotype was that I was supposed to have straight hair. And so a lot of even, pain coming out and also talking about how, yeah, just the idea of Asian hair is a stereotype, right? Because hair texture is not rooted in race. So just, even just silly pop culture, they're not silly, even any kind of discussions of representation, it does peel back the kind of institutional and societal inequalities that we still all live in, So I love that kind of, being able to talk about pop culture and race, and that's the sweet spot. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, that is what I tweet about.
Awesome. And then you have a Facebook page, an Instagram, and you have a website as well. You want to shout any of those?
Yeah, sure. It's all nancywyen.com. I'm the same handle on Instagram. I think I'm a little bit different on Facebook. It's like Nancy Wang Yuen, so WANGYUEN. But it's all kind of like, if you're on Twitter, just follow me on Twitter. I am on those other spaces, but they're just kind of like, they are like the summary of my Twitter life.
Got you. Well, shout out to Twitter. I know it's very rapid fire and lots of info. And if you're into the intersections of different topics, Twitter is always a fun space.
The greatest hits of my tweets.
I love it. Everyone can visualize it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Nancy. This has been a pleasure. I really want to make sure we follow up and get the rest of those resources that you named. Is there anything you want to say in your outro to folks?
Just love one another and be safe. and take care of yourselves. Self-care is really important at this time, and never give up on your dreams. That's what I'm telling myself right now. Like, it's never too old to go. You're never too old to reach out to your dream and make a difference.
I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, another interview in the can. Thank you all for listening. I want to share something new with you. Reflections, a Race Forward series, is a time-limited podcast, and I'm going to introduce it to you today. Race Forward is so proud to announce Reflections, a Race Forward podcast series, which will house an ongoing number of unique episodes focusing on timely issues, and the first one highlights stories from the immigrants' rights movement. And it was produced and hosted by our own Hendel Leva, who is the creator and executive producer of this very podcast. Reflections is co-executive produced by Cheryl Cato Blakemore, Race Forward's Vice President of Strategic Communications and Public Engagement, in collaboration with the National Partnership for New Americans, NPNA. So I want to congratulate my teammates, Cheryl, Hendel. Everyone check out Reflections, a Race Forward series. It's a time-limited podcast. It's going out in our newsletter. You'll see it going up on our social. So please do check out these stories. And I want to just remind you that Facing Race is open for registration. Remember to go to facingrace.raceforward.org. We are going to be in Phoenix, Arizona, and also virtual. So check out the site, get yourself up to speed, and there are ways to get involved right now. So whether you want to submit a proposal for Facing Race, or maybe you are interested in a scholarship, you've got lots of options. So check out the site today. We're going to move into closing and saying our goodbyes. Shout out to Heba. Shout out to our producer here, Kendi. Thanks again for listening. We want to encourage you to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Pandora, which we are new to. Please go on there, rate, give us all the stars in the world. Thank you so much.